When questions arise, there are multiple answers. Why are there multiple answers? Why are there multiple answers? Is because we live in a world of relativity of perception. Things look different depending on where you're standing. If you're scientifically minded, you'll understand that special relativity tells us this, that time is not fixed, space is not fixed. It depends where are you standing. You know, two rocket ships come and approach each other, and as they approach each other, they look as if each one says it's going fast, but as they move away, they seem to be slowing down. Their rate of speed is slowing down. You must have noticed this if you take an aeroplane and you look at the ground below. It looks as if it's moving very slowly. It doesn't look as if it's moving at whatever, 200-300 kilometers an hour, whatever it is. So things look different depending on where we stand. And in the Hindu prayers, they have a good reason, a well thought out reason, that behind every prayer, they have a prayer, a desire for peace. That is Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. They say it 3 times. They could have said it 4 or 5, but why only 3? Is because they have in mind a specific causal relationship. They understand that there is something called karma that relates to an individual, that is a causal law of sowing and reaping, to make it simple. And whatever you sow, you reap. That makes sense. It's a deterministic law, and it happens throughout the entire universe. If you say, why is there an earthquake? Well, because tectonic plates shift. But when you ask these why, then you may not be a satisfactory answer. You say, well, why do tectonic plates shift? Because without that, then the rest of the environment doesn't work properly, and you can go into the science of that. And what has it got to do with people who are suffering because the earthquake damaged so many properties and lives? Thousands of lives get lost. And we can't say why only people who are not very privileged, because nature is no discriminator of persons. Nature acts, and whatever the fallout is, that's how it is. Whether it's poor, whether it's rich, whether it is, the fact is you're living on a shifting plate. You can ask the same thing about San Francisco. Why does San Francisco, throughout history, have so many disasters, wiping out an entire city? And these are not necessarily poor people. Nature is indiscriminate about it. Well, why do we repeat a request for peace 3 times, knowing that cosmic mind will take it and enact it? It means God, the divine mind. In the divine mind, there are no obstacles. From the divine mind's point of view, there is no permanent world or permanent existence, because whatever is there was created from itself. And so one point of view would be whatever we call disasters or events are events that happen in a period of history that is a repetition of previous events. And from the cosmic mind point of view, creation, in order for it to be thoroughly causal and for it to work, will have to have 2 things going on. It'll have to have a positive and a minus. It'll have to have frustration. Frustration is the formula for life. Without frustration, nothing is going to move or live. And then what about the tragedy for people who've lost families and what have you? Certainly we can feel compassion for those people, but on the other hand, whether they are living, whether they're dying, it's only a temporary existence. The great scientists and philosophers of the past had a word for the world called Jagat, the thing that always changes. And for something to change, we have to expect there's a change, but we have to notice, in contrast to it, there's the changeless that stands behind it. These events will happen in the future. as they have happened in the past. If you take Pompeii, for example, where there was a big volcanic eruption in this case, then this, not an earthquake, but a similar kind of disaster that is even more disastrous than an earthquake. Shanti, repeated the first time, will say, I request that I get peace because of my causal activities, good or bad. If they're not so healthy, if they're negative, if they're more disturbing, well, let me try to neutralize it through peace. Secondly, you get a disturbance of your peace from others. You must have noticed. Groups campaigning against you, enemies left and right. And Arjuna on the battlefield had them. The Mahabharata, we find two camps essentially fighting each other. One is fighting for right, the other is fighting for might. And how do we distinguish between the two? How do we get over these so-called obstacles? Well, we have to also bear in mind there are no obstacles in the divine mind. So there's nothing to obstruct my good. Knowing that, I can handle my own causal relationships. Secondly, as I say, other people and my reaction to them. Now I have to decide what to do. When Swami Vivekananda was asked about Jesus' statement, turn the other cheek, should we do it in view of his emphasis on strength, national pride, etc.? He didn't answer immediately. I think I've told you before. He paused. Why did he pause? Why did he just say, yes, yes, that's true? It's because for so long, people turned the other cheek out of weakness, not out of strength. And so he said, yes, turn the other cheek, but the second time, or if it's repeated, give a blow to the other person's nose. In other words, there is a cause, there is a reason why we don't cower, that we stand up for ourselves. On what basis? On the basis of our own divinity. If we put it on the basis of our humanity, we're going to make a mistake. It's going to be something like the story of the holy man and the snake. We're going to be biting rather than hissing. I hiss many times, there's no doubt, but I don't want to bite. There's no feeling within me for harm. That's how it should be. Now this comes clearly out in the Bhagavad Gita, principally the essence of the Mahabharata, which says there is a duty you have to perform. And if there's nobody else to defend somebody, what will we do? The great Vishwamitra, who was a great king, he became a Brahma Rishi because he realized at the end, violence is not the answer. However, he was able to feign disapproval. People feared him because a curse from a holy man, well, that's a permanent thing unless neutralized by the holy man himself or some other means. But why should a person do that in the first place? Out of a sense of judgment, out of a sense of dharma. What is the best course of action that holds harmony together? And there's no religion on the earth at all that says, I can think of one exception, Jainism. Apart from Jainism, every other religion would say, please defend yourself. You take Sikhism, you see behind it is some militancy, and there's a historical reason for it. There's a reason why one of the 5 kulsas that are there would be something like a small knife or something of that nature, a sword of some kind. And why a turban is held by the Sikhs, it's a sign of manliness. It's not a gender issue, it's a quality issue, strength. So Christians, I don't think, if we look at their history, didn't say turn the other cheek always, because they fought crusader wars, and even the wars today, for example, the First World War, was essentially, you might think it's country versus country or groups of alliances, but behind it all is the Orthodox Church, Eastern Orthodox Church, and the Catholic Christian Church. And that divide is still there in that region. Croatia, Herzegovina, and so on is still there. So we do something for self-defense. We do something because it's the right thing to do. And we have to make sure that we evaluate properly the pros and cons of our action, which takes away the sting totally. When we know what is the right action to do, the right reaction, I should say. But you see, the fight or flight issue is, you can say fight and flight and yield, threefold issue. There is one alternative to it, and it's love. How can you fight something and still have love? It requires discernment. It requires taking the principles of our Vedanta philosophy, which is a universal philosophy, and seeing how to wisely apply it without any emotional disturbance, either in me or another. And we have to understand that in Buddhism only flourished, really, because of Ashoka, who was extremely violent. And then Ashoka, seeing the devastation that he was causing through his violence, changed his mind and turned himself to Buddhism, essentially in principle non-violence. Non-violence in thought, word, and deed, not just restraining your works, but restraining your thought. You know, we have a funny phrase in English when we say murder. People use it in a funny sense, I could murder a cup of tea or something like that. It means I'm desperate for a cup of tea. So we have to use these terms a little wisely and say there is room for defending oneself. And the basis of that is self-knowledge in the Atman. And it is done from a point of view of love. Love for the greater good. Love for oneself, that you will not be trampled on and turned into a doormat. Love for others, because you cannot help others or serve others unless you yourself are in a good condition to it. There's no good saying, let me help you walk, but I first have to learn how to get out of this wheelchair. That would not be a suitable thing. So make sure you are yourself on a correct condition in terms of wisdom, in terms of love, when you act. But act, please. Because allowing yourself to be a victim is a form of weakness. And the whole idea, whole understanding of the practical implementation of what we call yoga, that is the capacity to join something, join ourselves, as it were, to our apparently disconnected divine self. Only apparently, because we're not disconnected. It's just a mirage which says we are disconnected. No, we are always connected. In fact, life itself is the evidence of this connection. And so, on that basis, when we know the principle, enacting the principle then has to be done in a discriminatory way, and the value is strength. Swami Vivekananda time and again puts this. He says, I only teach in the West, I teach the Upanishads, and of that I take one value only, strength. Strength, not in an antagonistic way, but strength in terms of asserting yourself. Now, asserting yourself because you value the Atman in you and you value the Atman in others elsewhere as well. Then, of course, when we talk about meditation, by the way, Dhyana is a Greek goddess, as I understand it. A Greco-Roman goddess. Is Dhyana is the pronunciation, okay? Dhyana, what is Dhyana? Well, for that, we really have to study Patanjali Yoga Sutras that lays it out systematically and scientifically, that following this psychic control, this method, and talking about samadhi, we understand that there are some varieties in what we call samadhi. Broadly speaking, and we can go into it in greater detail, savitaka, niritaka, and so on and so forth. But to make it simple, we can categorize samadhi in a twofold way. One is savikalpa samadhi. That means literally with a cycle. In other words, there is not a full dissolution of the relative world. Nirvikalpa samadhi, the full dissolution of the relative world. In other words, absorption into the absolute. Put it in devotional language. Once you are absorbed into God, once this nearness becomes oneness, once the I-ness disappears, and the only thing which is there is the absolute, this whole world disappears. Do you have some examples of that? Yes. When we wake up, the dream disappears. When we go into deep sleep, waking and dream disappears. When we go into an anesthetic unconscious state, everything disappears. The only thing is it reincarnates, and you look up and you see the surgeon grinning or something, whatever it is. So things are relative. They appear and they disappear. And samadhi in its absolute state will be the disappearance of the relative world completely. And does that look like nihilism? Well, people are afraid of it because that's their interpretation of it. No, it's not. You're entering into a state of pure existence, pure consciousness, and pure bliss. Let's emphasize the last one, pure bliss. Taittiriya Upanishad gives us a wonderful gradation of what we mean by bliss. So we're all looking for this blissful state. But what's in the way? Obstacles are in the way. Removing obstacles is what we call spiritual life, or yoga, or any other term you like to use. When the state of meditation, dhyana, comes, then there is only one thought in the mind. And that leads to an experience of savikalpa samadhi. Savikalpa samadhi, where there is an understanding. And I give you an example. Let's say you have so many rooms, and they're conjoined. You go from one room to the other room like that, joined by, let's say, a passage, and they're all lit. Then on your left, that is in the future, you're looking at it, and you see the full blaze of something, and you're standing in a room that conjoins, where you've previously been and where you may enter into. And you don't enter into it. You look back and you can see all the previous rooms, all lit up, and you're standing in a position where you can see both sides. This is called savikalpa samadhi, where you are having a wonderful mystic experience with God. Prior to that, what you're doing is you're edging toward it with one thought only in the mind. This is dhyana. However, we use the term meditation and dhyana yoga, by the way, for their entire process. As I say many times before, it's like taking a flight above the clouds. You don't do it instantaneously. You'll make a runway first. You require the equipment, which you have, body-mind complex. With that, you can use it. And creating a careful runway, then you go up above the clouds. There's no imagination involved when you go above the clouds. But you see, at a low altitude, you're still able to see the ground. When you are devoid of any agency or any sense of duality, this is ultimately called nirvikalpa samadhi. But when you are still is a retention of a certain ego still there, such as, for example, I'm a devotee, and I don't wish to become sugar in the example. We all want the sweetness of sugar, let us say, but we don't want to become it. That's the argument of the devotee. Let me enjoy the sweetness. Now there are various types of dhyana, of course, dhyana yoga, because there are three approaches. There's the dualistic approach, where we want to concentrate on an individual anthropomorphized aspect of the highest, the supreme. What is God? Two definitions I've given you in the past. I can give you again. These are not my definitions, by the way. I should make that clear. These are Swami Vivekananda's wonderful definitions. He says in one place, he says that the embodiment of love is God. Put it that way. The embodiment of perfection is God. Then we can incorporate many other ideas. The embodiment of pure joy, that is God. The embodiment of the highest perfection we can ever understand, that is God. The highest ideal that we have, that is God. But still we have a sense of separation willingly. This is why dualistic devotees, for example, Madhva is the proponent of the dualistic system in Vedanta. He argues for keeping things separate. There's still a connectedness, no doubt, but the most beautiful devotion can come. Now, of course, we could also suffer from attachment to the bliss that flows from that, and at an extreme, we could have a dependency. We could be dependent, and that's a form of weakness. And then the Vishishtadvaita Ramanuja will say, well, wait, I feel that I am a connectedness, I'm a spark of the divine. This desiderata that hangs in St. Paul's Cathedral in London. I'm a child of the universe. I have a right to be here. That kind of expression. I feel a oneness. St. Francis of Assisi, brother sun, sister moon, that kind of sentiment. I feel this deep connectedness like a deep human relationship that is more than just something that is a sweetness of life. There's more of a connectedness. I feel a part of it. Somehow I feel that there are no two, and yet I still retain a duality. And then ultimately, yes, I am one with the divine, that understanding. Now, these are supplementary positions. These are not separated different things. Now I come back to an incomplete answer I gave about tragedies, why we say Shanti 3 times. I mentioned firstly, we take care of our own causal relationship, that is pain or suffering caused by ourselves. Give us peace on this. Secondly, caused by others, because others are present. And we won't fall into the trap when others cause a lack of peace, of reacting in a hostile way, aggressive way, anything like that. And Vishwamitra learnt that he could do it, but he could do it by hissing, not by biting. And then the third one is what insurance people call act of God. Things happen. Why is there an earthquake? Tectonic plates. Why is that? Because the earth is made and is constructed in this way so that it doesn't have any fixity, and it has a repercussion on the oceans and various other things, marine life, all kinds of things, all kinds of factors come into why those tectonic plates are like that. And then part and parcel of it is the earth spins. You must have noticed. It doesn't just randomly spin. It's spinning in a certain direction with a certain inertia and a certain rotation that gives day and night. And without that day and night, we don't have life at all. And so these things happen because nature has to be comprised of opposites. It is rough. It is not smooth. We're looking for the smoothness. We are looking for a beneficent, good God. Well, not necessarily. We have to understand that if nature is God's manifested extension, as it were, given that it has a framework of time and space and causation and function, given that framework, then things shift, things change. It has to be like that. There is nothing that stands still. If you dive down deeply into what is the understanding of the relative world at its most profound and deepest and proven level, is incomprehensible, because there doesn't seem to be any causal relationships anywhere, because waves behave not like solid things. You must have noticed how a wave and a rock are completely different. Yet at the fundamental level, a rock behaves like a wave. Not the rock itself, but the various component parts of the rock, namely the atomic structure. And the atomic structure is in a state of vibration that emphasizes inertia rather than electrical energy, and responds to gravity as a result. But when you look at it very closely, it is basically a whole lot of atoms doing their small dance on a very, very small microscopic level, to such an extent that even a microscope cannot pick it up. We can only pick up the effects. Electrons, have you ever seen? No, we see their effects. We see the trace. Higgs boson, did you ever see? No, we saw the trace of it. It came and went in a flash. So even underneath everything, space is not empty, is a teeming ocean of potentiality. What did John Wheeler, the great physicist, called, quantum foam. Some vacuum energy, they call it, is there, like a bubbling thing. And everything that comes out as a positively charged, has to have a negatively charged thing. Electron has to have a positron. They annihilate each other and go away until another one arises. Now, you may ask the eternal question that people seem to ask with a philosophical bent of mind: why is there something rather than nothing? It's a good question, because if the world is made from matter, how is it that it wasn't annihilated by antimatter? Where's all the antimatter? Please tell us this. Now, behind it is a divine will. The divine will consciously chooses, through free will, as it were, the fact that matter is there as part of its play. When you look at it that way, it's easy to explain. In fact, you can explain everything from that base, from that origin. So stuff happens, things happen, and things happen randomly. If things were smooth all the time, then we would not have any sense of morality, any sense of goodness. There would be no contrast. There has to be good and evil. That's the fact of it. And that is why in the religious mythologies, there's always this tug of war between good and evil. In Christianity, there's God and Satan, or God and the devil, something like that. And it creates a theological difficulty. Why would God create something like it? Create an anti-God? And so it's because there's no anti-anything. It's just the expression. Stuff happens. This is a third reason why we repeat Shanti. So 3 times we repeat it. This is the last time. Stuff happens. It will continue to happen. And when we ask why, we may just as well ask why not. What next? How can we move that? But you see, the difficulty is we are still stuck in a extra cosmic created God that causes everything and is responsible for everything. We put all these disasters on an unsuspecting God. Hey, why did you cause this? How is it that you didn't make a smooth world? No, God made the world and so it was good. Our view on it is one of discord. Now, it leads me now to share the thought, if you didn't see it today, because I think this also covers it. So, what was our thought today? It says, thoughts with aim and purpose yield as they go forth in mental field. Waves subtle move to coincide, mix and shape the world outside. Now there is another possibility that is being brought up, that supposing a whole nation buy into some kind of negative story. Swami Vivekananda thought one of the reasons why India may not do well and has not do well is because of its treatment of women. Then you think, how does that affect a whole country? Well, it's there. There's a communal thought, he felt, in India to do with weakness, historical weakness. Continuous conquest have made people dependent and subjugated and weak. And they have to retain their historical, cultural inheritance and glory. That was his great mission. We can put it at Ramakrishna's feet also, because that was, if you examine closely, that was his release of the shackles of India, having taught everything in such a universal way, and then his mouthpiece, Vivekananda, extending that. How can the universal message of Vedanta spread throughout the entire world unless India is politically free? That's the difficulty. Even up to fairly recently, these Upanishads were only translated ultimately into Persian, which came through into German. And even Schopenhauer, who was studying the Upanishads, just had this second-hand German version that was translated from Persian. So thoughts with aim and purpose yield as they go forth in mental field. Waves subtle move to coincide, mix and shape the world outside at a different level of understanding. Underneath everything, underneath this waking world, is a play of waves. We may call them quantum fields if we choose, but that's it. And they are waves, and they exhibit wave-like behavior. Is no mystery. They combine and recombine. According to what? According to a mental field. Our own? Yes, on a cosmic level, the cosmic mind. Wisdom, strength, and grace divine. If these we seek for all to shine, that grace has wave foundations laid, must bring unceasing, unasked aid. Discords, what are they? Discords are angels sent to tell. With holy thoughts fill mental well. When this is done, pure waves get urge to take soul to divine truth's verge. That verge of divine truth is what we call dhyana. Just on the verge, where one thought alone is left in the mind, and that is the divine. What's after that? Samadhi is where there is no thought in the mind. The mind is gone to all intents and purposes. And then the prayer has to go with it. O graceful Lord, thou art all the world and beyond. If we think of it in this way, the idea of comedies and tragedies won't impact on us. Let me merge my mind in thee, and so better shape the world for the welfare of every being. The state of dhyana, please. May all beings be brought to the verge, so that nearness becomes oneness. It's called samadhi. It's all there in today's thought and prayer. Well, we can leave it at that, unless there are other questions, but I don't know if I answered your questions properly.
Yes, Swamiji, thank you very much. I was taking copious notes.
Yes, Swamiji, thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
You see, coming to one of the questions and coming to this typology called for a broader range of listeners. So, supposing you're a type of person who feels compelled to help others, and we can never help others unless we reduce our own sense of worth and dignity. So to get that self-worth back again, we have to replace help with service, serving. Can we serve everybody? We cannot. Can we only serve those deserving of it? Yes. In that way, we have to make sure that we are not just the doormat taking advantage of us, of people taking advantage of us because we say, oh, there is a moral and ethical dictum which says, turn the other cheek, non-violence and so on. Non-violence is a mental thing. Non-violence is restraint on the emotional level. It's not restraint on the activity level.
Swamiji,
Yes,
question, how do we decide if the other person is worthy of service or
you
not?
don't decide. You simply observe, and you see all of these things. Positive thinking as such is tuning the mind, tuning your attention into the glory of the divine, and seeing what inspiration comes to you. Learning the process of doing that means all questions get answered. So
Yeah, reminds me of so yesterday or day before yesterday, I don't know, I was having some trouble to get an answer to a question. I was like, will I make the right choice this time or not? So I opened Mother's book, and the incident that popped up was first of all, her strength and courage, the incident with Harish, where she managed that. And then after that, it was how all the monks, including Swami Vivekananda, when they have to take an important decision in their lives, they would go to Holy Mother and do exactly what she says.
yes, we have to follow this example too.
Yeah, but I think but yeah, like you say, it comes, like you just know that guidance just comes
Yes.
at the right time. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, there's only the divine, and the divine mind, the cosmic mind is sitting there. If we assert our own prophet-actor complex, as I call it, our own ego into it, then it won't work well. Swami Vivekananda famously said, whatever I say, if it's true, it comes from my master. But if it's nonsense, I'm paraphrasing, it's coming from me.
Thank you, Swamiji.
All good.
Thank you so much. Thank you,
Okay.
Swamiji. Have a lovely
Okay.
day.
Right.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good day.